maybe some of us have met, and you've heard this before, but I think most of us haven't met yet. So I started Aikido in Chicago in the early 1990s. It was the Aikido Association of America. And then I moved around a lot. So I was bouncing from one dojo to another, various styles, before I finally landed in Europe. And in Europe, in Vienna, I met Endo Sensei. He had at the time, for me, a very difficult type of Aikido. He would never do anything the same way twice. It was impossible for me to follow. So I sort of gave up on him for a while, but I met a really impressive student of his on the mat once in Liechtenstein, and that was Nevelius. And let's say he really impressed me with his very soft style of Aikido. And through his soft teachings, I was able to find more of an access to Endo Sensei's Aikido and followed both of those instructors then for many, many years. I still do when I have a chance. Now, that involved traveling around a lot, and I was in a phase where I didn't want to travel quite so much, so I was trying to find some solution how I could maybe train more in Vienna, where that style wasn't so common. And it was at a seminar with Huang where he put a book into my hand, and it was one that he said that he drew a lot of inspiration from himself. And it was a collection of short stories or essays or descriptions of experiences with the Tai Chi master named Zheng Manqing. I don't know if either of us realized it at the time, but that was basically my little push into the Tai Chi world. So sometime later, I was talking to a friend in Aikido circles. She recommended her former Tai Chi instructor to me. He then became my first Tai Chi instructor. And ever since then, I've been practicing both. At first, my idea was that I was going to practice Tai Chi with the intent of enriching my Aikido. I never had a thought of switching systems. But now that's pretty much the only thing I train. If I can get to Aikido 2-3 times a year, that's pretty good. For the most part, I just train Tai Chi. But the original idea, I don't think was wrong. It is a fruitful field for cross-pollination, given that we look at, let's say, what I'm sure are very common, maybe even universal principles through two different perspectives. It's quite a good opportunity to take something from one system and try and apply it in the other. It's not something that I could do full time. I just don't have enough hours in a day or enough years in my life. But I've learned quite a few things over the last few years, and tonight, for the next hour, I'll do my best to try and communicate some of them to you. So with that, why don't we get started? So the Tai Chi that I practice is in the Yang school. I mean, there's different schools of Tai Chi, Yang, Chen, Wu. The Yang lineage goes way back. I've made an effort to memorize it a couple of times, but never quite succeeded. At least Yang Chen Fu to Zheng Manqing, the man about whom this book was written. Zheng Manqing to Huang to Patrick Kelly, and Patrick Kelly is currently still alive. That's the Grandmaster in our system. My teacher is one of his personal students, and so what does that make me in the lineage? Since I'm not all that important, really. The style that we use has, let's say Patrick especially, has built a very, how shall I put it, detailed model together about how things work. He's extraordinarily detailed in the descriptions of what's happening externally. We have what we call the inches, which meaning, okay, in this position, perhaps the shoulder has to be higher, it's sinking here, there's 2 fingers distance, the hand is exactly this position in that. That's the external structure. But also about what's happening internally. And since it would be, none of us is going to learn a new Tai Chi form tonight. It takes too much time. So I'm going to focus on these internalities to the extent that I can describe them and try and find a way to put them into an Aikido context. So the first concept, maybe the most important concept, the one which is most indicative of our school, is the concept of mind. Not that we invented it or anything, but the way Patrick has sort of dissected it and explained it. So what is the mind? It's a massive question, very difficult, but we can approach it in parts. And the first part that I would mention is what we call the superficial mind. That's what we're using right now. I'm using it to talk, you're using it to listen. It's what we use to manage our shopping lists and drive our cars and just manage our day-to-day life. It's a powerful tool. We wouldn't live without it. However, it's not necessarily very productive in a training setting. So the very first thing that we do is try and send the mind deeper. Now what does that mean? We have a second concept, or a second part of the same concept, called the deep mind. And the deep mind is sort of anchored in the body's intelligence. So we talked about 5 internal sensors. I'll come back to those in more detail later. But just to give you a quick list, that's pain, that's joint position, muscle state, pressure, and temperature. These are things which, let's say, the superficial mind has a really hard time dealing with. Yes, I can say, I want that glass of water, reach out my hand and grab it. Superficial mind can direct this action, but it's the deep body, the deep mind intelligence, which is actually coordinating the joints, which is making sure that I'm not squeezing the glass too hard. It's actually managing all of the complex interactions that make this motion possible. And this is the level that we want to access in training, the level where we want to build up our intelligence ability. So we start with exercises. The 5 loosening exercises, we call them. The first one looks something like this. You're welcome to practice along with me if you like. You're also welcome to take an exercise that we see very commonly in Aikido situation. This one, or an exercise that Jan often shows at the beginning of the class, something like this. The main point is less which exercise you use. That form, that kata, gives you a structure where you can look for whether you're doing things right or wrong, whether you're doing things, where you find corrections. Main thing is that you have that structure, then you can look for it. But internally, I think we have a lot of commonalities. Why? What am I doing here? I'm trying to send my mind deep into the body and listen to these internal sensors. I'm listening to my joints at the moment. First, I want to ensure that my center is moving smoothly. So it's not stopping, jerking, having corners, things of that nature. It should be moving smoothly from one foot to the next. The pressure changes and the folds of the feet. But the position of the feet doesn't change. The position of the knees doesn't change all that much. And surely you've all seen this exercise, for example, done this way. The foot leaves the floor, the knees move around. This would be an example of what we don't want to do in this sort of exercise. So right now, I'm focusing on the center motion. Rather too early to start corrections right at first. Really, you just want to find that motion to send your mind deeply to a state where you can start to pick up on the changes. And then once you've gotten into that state, you start looking at the joints. You start from the feet to move upwards. Are my feet moving? Yes, they are. Okay, so that's not so good. So let's stabilize those. Oh, now I'm compensating by moving my knees. That's not so good either. So if I try and lock in my knees, lock in is the wrong word, but stabilize them, then all of a sudden I'm to a major point in this exercise, and that is the opening and the closing of the hip joints. And that's a hard one. I've been working on that one for years. Now, having done that, if you move into the upper body, this exercise has a twist in it. I move the hips, to exaggerate now, and the body and the shoulders follow. at a slight lag. That's because it takes time for this wave to propagate itself up through the torso, which has the additional effect that this shoulder joint opens and closes as I move. Another thing to look for. At the same time, there is a pressure that builds in the foot that percolates up through the body or propagates up through the body. It's what lifts the arms. And in a detail of the form, there's a synchronization here. I'm lifting the arms, my body starts to sink, the shoulders sink, the arms follow. And the arms have to release at a very controlled rate. And it's the shoulders that sink and the hip is still opening when the arm moves up. How high it moves up has a lot to do with how fast you're moving. Right, and so that's our first access, or our first attempt to move the mind out into the body and activate the body's intelligence. And I am convinced, although I might be wrong, that the moment of silence that we often have at the beginning of an Aikido class serves this purpose. It's not explicitly stated, at least it hasn't been to me, but I really think that's what it's for. I would often start a class by saying, leave your worries at the edge of the mat, but be there when you get finished. But I never put that in the context of sending the mind deeper. But it's such a fundamental concept, at least in the Tai Chi universe, that if the principles indeed are common, as I believe they are, then that's the only reason I can think of to do this. So, the second loosening exercise is a lifting and a sinking. You see my knees moving, that's not actually all that right. Sinking is a rotation of the pelvis. A bit hard to see. Where the hip joints rotate like this. This is, I think, losing, and that's an opening. So as I sink, I'm moving my arms. 2 beats up, 2 beats down. This exercise, well, when you switch exercises, the superficial mind becomes excited. So it's, again, quite important to take that first moment and send it back down into the body. Try to feel what's happening there. Again, the first and most important detail is the smooth movement to the center. Then you can start checking your joint sensors. Are my feet stable? Are they moving around? What are my knees doing? What are my hips doing? The arm movement, as I'm lifting, there's something called a compression wave rising through the body. This is something that you pick up with the next internal sensor, the pressure sensor. And this wave lifts the shoulders. And as soon as it propagates upwards, you start to sink and release. That sinks the shoulder. So the shoulder is extending the wave propagating through the body. And as the shoulder then releases, the elbow releases, the wrist releases, the hand releases. All of that is in a sequence. So it's never that we're doing this, our arms aren't stiff. We're always trying to keep an activated elastic state that allows motion generated by the center to propagate through the body and through all of the different members. So a common saying in Tai Chi that power is generated in the feet and directed by the center. And more these last couple of years, I'm finding that's true, but at least in my own particular physical construction, kind of hard to realize. But yes, as the body sinks, your pressure sensors will notice the pressure is building in the legs, propagating up through the body. As the center starts to come up, the upper body is still on its way down a bit, so you get a sense of pressure in the hips or in the waist. As the torso starts to move up, you get a bit of pressure in the neck and the head area. That's just the sign of this compression wave rising through the body. So the third loosening now, again, I'm going to switch exercises, is it contains all of these elements that we saw in the first two. So you will first want to go deeper, then start checking your joints. The sense of pressure is a bit harder to find because the motion is much shorter and more complex. But it's also something that I have seen in different forms in Aikido contexts. It looks something like this. I'll turn sideways. So what's new about this one then? The third loosening exercise has a really pronounced twist. We talk about different kind of waves that pass through the body. There's the compression wave. We talked about that one. There's the lateral wave. That's this one. And then we have the torsional wave. That's this one. It's the twist. So I'm moving my hip forward. The hip turns the torso brings the shoulder brings the arm. The hip is now moving back, making space. The shoulder sinks, and then the elbow and the arm and the hand sinks. So the shoulder is sinking before the hand has actually reached its highest point. The fourth one, the hands start under the center. The hips rotate. That's the sinking motion again. Body starts to sink. The hands sink. Now the body starts to lift. That causes the hands still have momentum downwards. So the body starts to lift. The hands proceed along their arc until they're dragged along by the shoulders. Now the body is sinking again. Hands come together. Everything is sinking together. Now it repeats. The body starts to lift. The hands are still sinking. Now the hands, the shoulders, the elbows, and the hands follow. The body starts to sink again. It sinks the shoulders. The hands come together. Normally we only do 2 of these. I'll do another one sideways so we see it from that angle. Now, oops, I'm collapsing there. See that? That means that I've lost my structure, and the pressure is not building correctly in my body. It's breaking out at some weird angle. So that was a good example of what not to do. One more. So now the pressure builds again. The shoulders are still sinking. The pressure reaches the shoulders, propagates through the hands. Body starts to sink again. Now, The legs are now not straightened to the point of reversing the direction of the joints, but they're straight. And the advantage of this position is we can now work with the muscle, or relax the muscle, stretch the muscle, loosen the muscle between the shoulders. It's really hard to do that from a different position. The hands, I'm not moving those. It's just the shoulders that I'm moving. The hands are just following. Let the head hang. All right. Then crouch back down so that the upper legs are parallel to the floor. Press from both feet. The body lifts straight in the spinal column, one vertebra at a time. Until you're back in a vertical position. And that's the fourth routine. We don't normally teach any additional internal sensors and whatnot based on that exercise, but it does unify a lot of the things that we brought in from previous exercises, and it really is the best way to relax this muscle back here, or these muscles back here. The motion of the shoulders that we practiced in hanging, we find them again in the pushing hands, which but we might talk about it a bit today, but we won't get the chance to do it, and none of us has a partner. Okay. Right. Last but not least, actually I find it the hardest of the lot, is the fifth loosening exercise. So I'm turning. My heels are on a line, much like the arm in a Hanmi stance. Find your front foot. This means that your pelvis is rotated, that your coccyx, that your tailbone is, let's say you have a feeling that it's connected to the middle part of your front foot. The hips should be rotated forward. So that enforces a really intense opening of, in my case, I got my right foot forward, so the left hip, and a really good closing of the right hip joints. Now from here, I push straight back. It's very common to go up. I've been doing that for years, it's not right. Straight back, while you are sinking, while you are rotating this hip into the back foot, sink into the back foot, the hips are rotating, this joint is opening, power will come through this joint forward, pressure builds, move forward, back into the front foot. And then the cycle repeats, moving back, sinking, hip joints open, move forward. There is a wave here as well. To dramatically exaggerate it, will look something like this. So your hips start moving first, then your back, and then your breast follows. So there's a sense of a pull on the spine. And then as you're moving forward, the reverse takes place. You have to get a bit of activation along the front of your body. The hips will move forward. The lower part of the torso will move forward, the belly. Then you'll feel a slight pull in the breasts as that finally moves forward. We don't have a particular job for the arms in this particular exercise, so they can hang loosely. I'm often trying to feel what exactly my hips are doing if I can't. This is the challenge of the internal sensors. We can always work with external help. Like I can turn right now and I see myself on the screen, and I can use that to sort of gear my efforts. But that's not necessarily a productive way to train this, because the goal is that we're building our body intelligence, that we are doing this with our internal sensors. And so while external aids are useful now and then, they shouldn't become a crutch that we rely on. quite a challenge here, at least for me, is to try and keep the upper body vertical, and let's say the hips in a position where it can be vertical. It's very easy to say, go back too far, suddenly I'm in my heel, I can't sink anymore, I move my upper body back. This kind of position is, well, classical mistake. So many mistakes, I think I've made most of them by now. Now, by pushing onto the back foot, lifting from the back foot, is now a one-legged stance. Sink. Where my toe now is, that's where my heel goes. Lift. Where my heel now is, that's where my toe goes. Turn. I'm sinking the whole time, or trying to. Left foot goes out. And now we repeat on the other side. There, I just noticed that my right knee caved in like this. That's something I've been noticing a lot lately. On the one hand, why am I still doing that after 15 years of Tai Chi? On the other hand, well, I've noticed it, so now I have an opportunity to improve it. I didn't mention it in the second exercise, but I'll mention it now in the fifth. We also have three aspects of mind: the active, the passive, and the neutralizing. The active in this case is what we call intention. What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? That's the intention. The passive, that's listening, that's awareness. So what am I doing? This is more or less what I started with in paying attention to your joint senses. And the third part, the neutralizing, that's intelligence. That's the ability to look at what I tried to do and register what actually happened, look at what the difference is, and learn from that experience. Of course, I'll have a second attempt, and my intention should be to improve something, some little tiny aspect. This exercise, any Aikido exercise, none of them are something that you master in the course of a single hour or a single class or even a single year. It's an iterative process that takes decades. And this model captures that quite elegantly. Now, this fifth exercise is one which I think even more than most of the others I would see in Aikido practice, or at least I was always trying to implement in Aikido practice. We're constantly attempting to, well, let's just take the basic Ikkyo. We have a stance. We tend to keep a narrower stance. Excuse me. A narrower stance in Aikido, this Hanmi, where we're 70% forward and 30% back, and it's quite a narrow stance. In Tai Chi, we take a much broader one. We call it a bow stance. The reason I think is stability. It's more in line with the actual width of the hips. Certainly narrower stances are possible, but they're more difficult, basically. We keep the stance very narrow in the fifth exercise because it's hard. But during form and pushing hands, we adopt a broader stance. But whatever stance you do, I think this idea of being in the front foot, pushing off, sinking into, not sinking into the back foot too quickly, but sinking into the back foot, building power here, releasing it through this opening hip. I think that's quite common between the two arts. We've all had this experience with Ikkyo. Somebody comes, we move over with this hand, we grab this one, we start trying to move them with the arms first. Why do we do that? Because we see our instructor, when we see our instructor do it, we see his hands go over there, so with our very superficial intelligence, we think, right, I put my hands over there. Some years later, we've made many corrections, we realize it's the hips. the whole body turns. Some years later, and this is where I came in with the Tai Chi understanding, it's not just the hips that are moving, it's he's coming in, I'm moving off from the back foot, I'm sinking, this pressure is building, this intention is building. Now I release this intention, the hips start to turn. The upper body doesn't turn simultaneously with the hips, the whole body is not moving as one, but there's a wave in here. And of course, I want to move this front foot along with that motion. So this is where I see a lot of the commonality in my, let's say, daily or occasional Aikido practice. This is usually what I'm trying to do. Where do I find this vertical circle? That's what we call the hip exercise sometimes in the Tai Chi, in the Aikido practice. Lifting the arms is another good one. It's not just I'm here and I lift my arms. It's I'm sinking. I'm sinking away from my arms. My arms are pretty much staying where they were. Here comes the showman. I'm not trying to rise to meet it. I'm trying to sink away from it, make a connection here, let it continue coming a little bit. I'm capturing this in the elasticity that's building in my body. We're trying to. Oh my goodness, I should never look at the external feed. Yeah. So with one of the big challenges with Aikido is how quickly we progress to partner work. In our typical Tai Chi class, we start with the loosenings. I went a little bit long. Normally we take 20 minutes for those. Then we do the form. This is what you've all seen people doing in the park. Maybe you've done it yourself. So people will stand here, sink, leg goes out, lift, there's the vertical wave, body is sinking away, arms are still rising, arms are following, turn. Oh, these classical Tai Chi positions. What are we doing here? We're trying to find a continuous process, a continuous motion. We're trying to implement all of those things that we repeated over and over again in the loosening exercises. Sink, shoulders sink, hand comes forward. It's not actually moving all that much. Body is moving relative to it. But all of this is stuff that we're doing by ourselves. Nobody's touching us yet. And that's already hard enough. So, as I said, I'm trying to send my deeper. I'm trying to realize what my feet are doing, what my knees are doing, what my hips are doing. What are all these joints doing? What are the pressures in the body? What is the quality of this motion? What's the equivalent in Aikido? We have a while where we stretch, loosen, we do our gymnastics, then we have our routine. Sometimes we'll do a Tai Sabaki where we just practice Idemi Tenkan, for example, or Endo Sensei has us always doing hits. That is the rough equivalent of the form. We don't normally spend a lot of time doing it. What we do spend a lot of time doing is working together as partners. This is something we do at the very end of the Tai Chi class. Why? Because it is so complex. All of this work to establish a understanding of my own body suddenly becomes double. I'm not trying to understand it in my own body alone. I'm trying to understand it in my partners as well. And coming at it from that perspective, it's insanely difficult to work with a partner. It's crazy. And yet in Aikido, we blow through the exercises and the polish school in the first 25 minutes, and it's on to the partner work. I don't want to call that good or bad. I just want to highlight that once you start working with a partner, things get much difficult because the tendency is to fall back on more rougher processes. I lose track of what's happening in me. I'm thinking about what I want to do to you, and I start applying rough pressure and rough force to do that. Excuse me. So that, to my mind, makes Aikido actually the more challenging of these two arts, although it's a crazy comparison because they're both so hard. So what can I offer on that? I really would recommend that everybody take as much time as they can to go as deep as they can before getting into the partner work. And then during the partner work, please try to be aware of what's happening inside yourself and in your partner, as opposed to just what is the technique. It's asking a lot, and I fail at it myself regularly, but I do really firmly believe that that is the basic goal that we have in training in internal martial arts. Yeah. See, we've got about 20 minutes left. I'd like to finish with the meditation for about 10 minutes. So how about we take the next 5-6 minutes and just practice the first parts of the form together. So that is here. I'm standing with my heels together as vertically as I can. Right. You'll notice this as you start looking at yourself. I tend to have what do we call it, a widow's hump and a hollow back. So I'm here trying to sink my hips or rotate my hips in a way that flattens out my back, and making sure that my head is over my shoulders and my shoulders are over my torso. The hands, the middle finger is going to be roughly on the seam of your pants. Breathe in, breathe out. Connect into your right foot. Connecting to the right foot means that I can lift the left one. Step out with the left. This foot is now straight. Rotate the right. Press from both feet. Body lifts, shoulders lift, body starts to sink, shoulders sink, elbows sink, hands sink. So, before the hands reach the bottom of their motion, turn in the left foot, start to sink. The right hand is pulled up by this turn. There's a chain of muscles that activate across the back, shoulder, and arm. Move forward into the front foot. Push off from the front foot. As I'm looking into the corner, I start to sink. Step out. Again, the body turns. The hand is in front of my breastbone. Pushing off from the left foot now, sinking. The right heel goes where the right toe was. The left foot turns in. The hips turn, the torso turns, a twist. Ward off right. Push off back. Left hand sinks, passes through the quads, we call it, the loin. I start to sink, pulls down my shoulders, pulls down the arm. It comes forward, passes about a fist away from my ear. Meets the second hand with the breastbone. Forward, just like the fifth routine exercise. I'm now in the front foot, and only now do my hands go forward. Sorry, I was too late. The hands move last, and now I sink into my front foot. Push off from the front, sinking. Down on the front foot. Now I'm going to shortcut the form. It's quite a bit longer than that, and that's the short form is the word. There's also a long form, which is 3 times longer. Let's do that again. I'll talk less this time. Try to pay attention to what your joints are doing. Chains of muscles moving, pulling the body, activating the body. posture. These chains of activation that run across, so let's say from the hips across the back to the shoulder. Jan has mentioned them on occasion, uses somewhat different words, but it's exactly that. Look for those in your Aikido practice. It's far more efficient to, what I'm doing here, turning the hips, allowing that muscle across the back to pull across my shoulder. Now the shoulder starts to move. Than it is to simply, with your superficial mind, move the arm from A to B. Okay. So I've touched on it a bit. We have these different components of training. We have the loosenings, we have the form, we have the pushing hands. I'm sorry that I can't really demonstrate that today. You need a partner. The other person is going to be touching you, let's say wrist to wrist in this case, in this situation where we're doing this. And all of these things that I've been talking about, the joint sensors, the internal sensors, I'm trying to apply that to their system as well. As we often say in Aikido, once you touch your partner, once you're doing a technique, you're not two individuals anymore, you're one system that you have to move with your own. About this depth when you train is that, well, by no means forbidden from talking during class, but when you're talking, you're really exciting and activating the superficial part of your mind. And as we know, that's not necessarily conducive to a productive training. So, and we've all been or met this person who's really keen to teach you what you're doing on the mats, your partner, not necessarily the trainer. And really that person is neither helping themselves nor you. They're pulling themselves out of their deepest state in order to give you an instruction, and they're irritating your deeper state with that instruction. So this is something that we like to say in the Taiji circle, you help your partner the most by giving them your very best technique, and not by trying to explain them to something. So that's one really interesting takeaway from this idea of mind and the division into different levels. And another one, a corollary to that is teaching. I imagine many of you are instructors and teachers in your own right. And it's a massively important job because, as we know, it's very, very difficult to know what's going on in your own motion. Today, I'm constantly doing things like this. My instructor's been telling me not to do that for 10 years. Why don't I get it? It's because it's happening somewhere where I don't see it, where I don't feel it. Well, it's always easier to see something going on in your partner than it is seeing something going on in yourself. As training partners, that's dangerous. Again, I don't want to bring us out of our deep state into a superficial state to explain that. That's the instructor's job. So in many ways, the instructor is sacrificing a bit of their deepest training in order to help you with yours. And so, yeah, what does that mean? It's something that I've now learned really to appreciate my instructors, that they are willing to take that upon themselves. And it's made me a lot quieter as a student. I used to have a really bad habit of trying to correct my partners, and I really try not to do that anymore, to the point that maybe some people wonder if I just don't want to talk to them. I don't know. So those are two really interesting takeaways from this whole concept of mind. Right. The final part of training that we do is meditation. is an integral part of our system. And in many ways, the training builds up to it. We start by trying to get the mind into the body. And we try and go deeper and deeper and deeper throughout the class. So starting with basic repetitive motions, then we start looking for pressure here. We start looking for activation, more subtle levels during the pushing hands in ourselves and in our partner. And then we conclude with the meditation. And that's what I'd like to take you through now. So if you are not sitting, you might want to do so. You can stand if you like, but it's more challenging. You can lay. We don't have any particular positions required for this. I'll just have a seat here. And really, the thing to do, we're going to try and do is shut down superficial mind even more than we already have. So I'm going to ask you to breathe in. Breathe out deeply. And listen into the room around you. I hear an aquarium pump. I hear my girlfriend in another room. You may hear traffic. You may hear birds. And then a second time, breathe in, all the way to the top of your head. Breathe out again, listening into the further distance. Traffic, wind, whatever you hear out there. Just let it flow through. And then a third time, breathe in deeply. Pull in your awareness back into your body. And breathe out again. Don't send your mind back out into the realm around you, but keep it in your body. Put your focus in the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. With each breath, the mind sinks a bit deeper, and you'll start to notice there are sensations in your hands and feet, a sense of tingling, warmth perhaps. This is the first of the external sensors that I mentioned earlier, the internal senses that I mentioned earlier, the pain sensors. Doesn't mean the things hurt, it's just the receptors that detect pain or detect sensation from outwards. They have sort of a base state where they're sending signals to the brain, whether there's something really intense to feel or not. Breathe in and breathe out. Mind sinks deeper, and these sensations spread. They fill the hands and the feet and start to spread into the wrists, into the ankles. It can be quite difficult for the superficial mind to concentrate into multiple limbs at once, but it's something that the deep mind has no trouble with. That's its job. Mind sinks deeper. Breathe in, breathe out. Allow the sensations to fill your lower arms, your lower legs, and spread into your upper arms and upper legs. Sense of tingling is slowly replaced by a sense of fullness and warmth. And you feel the dimensions, the volume of your limbs. Sensations spread further into your shoulders and thighs, hips. Up into your neck. Into your head. And then hold that sensation down out of your head, through the neck again. Into your torso. Really fill out your chest, your back, into the abdomen. All the way down into your pelvis. Breathe in and breathe out. And concentrate the sensations at a point between the legs, the perineum. Allow a sea of warmth and light to form there. Each out breath becomes stronger and more intense. The boundaries of your body start to dissolve a little bit. So your arms might feel larger than they are. And once you've managed to anchor that sensation, then with your next in-breath, pull a thick stream of light over the base of the tailbone, up over the back. Up across the neck, straight through the head, the crown of the head. Breathe out. Allow the light to flow over the front of your face. Across the nose, chin, neck, across the breastbone, down the abdomen. Background of the point between the legs. We'll do that twice more. Breathe in a second time. Pull that light strongly up the back. Across between the shoulders, up the neck, the back of the neck, through the head, the top of the head. Allow it to flow back down the front of the face, across the chin, the neck, chest, belly, and back to the perineum. The third time for yourself. Tension. Pull this light from the point between the legs up the central channel. Through the center of the body. Straight up to the chest, to the middle dantian, to a point behind the lower end of the breastbone. Pull it up, 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 up. Then when you breathe out, allow it to flood out and fill the body. Fill your arms and legs. Into the space around the body, about an arm's length in all directions, left and right, front and back, above and below. With each breath, the light in that sphere, the large dantian, grows stronger, brighter. And then once you have a feeling that it can't possibly get any brighter than it is now, send a light intention. Don't direct the energy back down again, but a light intention back to the point between the legs, to the lower dantian, and pull the light up a second time, up through the central channel. You may feel reactions inside your body as the energy flows through. Into the middle dantian, the solar plexus, and allow it again to spread out throughout the body, and into the great dantian, the large dantian surrounding the body, and arms length in all directions. Mind sinks deeper, the great sphere of light becomes more and more tangible, the body fades into the background. And now a third time for yourself. Reach back down into the lower dantian and pull the energy back up to the middle dantian. And allow it to spread into that sphere around the body. Starting points of our meditation. It's the preparatory step. There's various practices that start from there. That's at this point, I would say, reach out into this sphere of light, try and feel its dimensions. When you breathe in, pull it, concentrate it in towards the center of towards your solar plexus, a couple of centimeters, 5 to 10 centimeters. And then with the out breath, release it back out to its full space. Just try and do this over the next couple of breaths. It's just a way of training the attention on this side. Now, look for or allow the deep body sensation to come back into your awareness. Look for your heartbeat, your pulse. They've been there the whole time, but shifting our attention back into the body brings them back into our perception. Do your best to keep that sensation of the sphere of light around the body, but do allow the physical body sensation to come back into your awareness. You may feel all sorts of things happening in your body at this stage. That's perfectly normal and desirable. Then slowly open your eyes. And we can conclude the class. Thank you very much.